It explodes in the no man's land no podcast ever dared cross before.
Is that the tagline? That's a great tagline.
Isn't it? That's why I wanted to do it.
Oh, yeah, I love that. It's such a good poster, too. And the poster makes you think that it's a movie about a badass military operation in no man's land, like a bunch of fucking heroes.
Switcheroo. Right,
tearing it up,
Right. It's I mean, the poster is like Kirk Douglas in like action pose, his hand
Grimace.
like gripped up near the grimace. It makes it feel like this whole movie is going to be him in the fucking trenches wrestling people to the ground.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the full image version of this because it's one of your.
I've got it. It's got a two tagline. I've got the other one.
Now I'll butcher this as well. Now the podcast blasts open the bombshell story of a colonel who led his regiment into hell and back, while their maddened general waited for them with a firing squad.
I mean, that's a good tagline, and it's not inaccurate. I guess
it's not.
Yeah, it just makes it like a tale of daring do.
It makes it seem like a Kirk Douglas action epic, which this movie is fascinatingly not, I would say.
Sure. I love this movie.
Yeah, can I throw out a hot take?
Uh-huh.
Really fucking good.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Had you ever seen it before?
I'd seen it before. I hadn't seen it in a while.
Can I ask, what was your favorite part?
Oh, when it ended.
When you were done?
Well,
That's your favorite part?
I get, it's been discussed much on the show. I get very stressed out watching war films. Even when I think they're good, I find it to be a somewhat unpleasant experience. So I think the whole movie's very well made, but the moment when it ended and I could start breathing normally again and working on lowering my heart rate, even for a movie that's not that combat heavy, although the one big combat sequence is harrowing.
It's very impressive. Yes. Yeah. Our guests can talk anytime, by the way.
Oh, openly invited to. Yeah.
Just chat.
Encouraged.
I'm used to the construct where it's like we have to pretend that I'm coming to the door, like the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood version.
We do the opposite of this.
Even though your name is in the title, but right now I love the early break-in from the guest. It makes me very happy.
The call is coming from inside the house. That's what we sort of go for. They've been here the whole time.
Yeah, now it's creepier because I was silent for a couple of minutes and yet I was here.
Right. That's what we're looking to.
Yeah. Love to make
shock
a creepy
and terrify
entrance.
our listeners at every turn.
Settle.
Good.
Yeah. Ben, I'm curious, producer Ben, did you have a favorite part? It felt like you were asking because there's a part you wanted to spotlight.
Oh, not in particular. Well, how about, I like a good ditch, but I think there's too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah.
World War I was certainly too much of a good thing on the ditch front.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's a good, yeah. Uh-huh.
Like, it's fun to hang out in there for maybe an hour, but like a year, no thanks.
It's important for you to watch World War I movies so that you are reminded that there is such a thing as too much ditch.
You know the limits.
Yeah. You can take it too far.
I mean, there's nothing more brutal and, depressing than trench warfare, and any image you see of it, you're like, good God, like, this is horrible.
Sucks.
But then, like, I also did grow up like watching Blackadder, which is a critique of World War I, obviously. That is not like pro World War I. But when you're a kid, you're like, oh, they've got their little like houses, like their little beds in there. And so I don't know. When you're a kid, I think there's some charm to trench life that is obviously, only in sanitized sitcoms.
I was kind of thinking that while watching this, which immediately was a thought I felt very guilty for.
Right. Me too. I feel a lot of guilt.
But if it's in a set, then there is that childlike part of you that's like, oh, forts. Right. And I was just thinking of Blackadder as well, because any enclosed space, that Lego they sleep in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, these are all exciting for a child.
Right. I think I would like it if the war wasn't happening. It's really I think we're getting actually to the breakthrough here, which is it's not that World War I had too many ditches, it's that the ditches were the respite from the war that you had to stay in. I think I'd happily live in a trench if when I crawled out of it, I could just take a pleasant stroll and not have to spend 10 harrowing minutes blowing my whistle trying to dodge bullets.
A lot of whistle blowing. A lot of whistleblowing. It is wild that in World War One they were like, how are we going to fucking convince people to do this? And they were like, I don't know, blow whistles. Like so many whistles. When I was like 13, I grew up in Britain here. Sarah, I don't know if you know that, but I did. I grew up in the United Kingdom.
I don't know what
Griffin,
this is.
You cool with that?
I don't understand why you're taking the time to ask Sarah if she knows this and not ask Ben and I.
Okay, Ben, Griff, are you aware of that?
Absolutely not. First I've ever
heard this ever.
Brand new information.
You don't have an accent.
Yeah, where'd it go?
Yeah, I know. I get that a lot. It went away. I was born in America. You know.
Where's your chimney sweep hat?
My chimney sweep hat is in my coat closet. I don't know.
Where's your teacup?
It's in like the kitchen. What are you talking about? You think I have to carry that shit around all the time?
Where's your friggin' biscuits?
Yeah.
I could do with a biscuit around here. That'd be nice. I went when I was, I guess, what you'd think like 8th grade or whatever. I went on a battlefields, a World War I battlefields trip with my history class. So we went to Belgium, and you go see some trenches, and you go you're visiting all these battlefields, and they show you the graveyards, which are crazy. I mean, it is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So many gravestones, and then they'll show you like the enemy graveyard. Like they're like, this is where we buried the Germans, and they're like, every headstone there's like 40 bodies, right? Like, because they were just like piling them in without any real care. And I remember I took so many pictures of the graveyards because we were like 13 years old, and we were like, oh my god, this is crazy. And I came home, and my parents were like, so like, tell us about your trip, like show us the pictures. And I was just like, this is a graveyard with no people in the picture. This is the German graveyard. And they were just like, who cares? Like, what? This is all you took pictures of. That's all. That's my story.
How are you going to take a picture that a ghost shows up in if you don't? That's how I thought that was going, was that your parents were like, there's a strange light.
What is this blur on the image here? Yeah. I don't know. Don't give a 13-year-old a camera, 13-year-old boy on a graveyard, on a battlefield trip a camera. He's not going to get you anything good.
I don't know. We should test that hypothesis.
Okay.
Let's get together a sample
group. A bunch of 13-year-old boys on a battlefield trip.
That's a great found footage movie.
What are all these 13-year-old boys doing on the battlefield with iZone cameras? I don't know. Fucking Blank Check sent them here. They got those Polaroid sticker strips.
Don't you think that a successful podcast, like the natural next step, is to expand into more reenactments? Because I've often thought that.
There are the steps of just, you do the podcast, you start a Patreon, TeePublic page, war reenactments.
Your Patreon goal is like, we will reenact the Battle of Ypres, right? That's it. 9,000 subscribers. We're getting everyone on a plane. We're sending them to Belgium. You're going to dig trenches.
Yeah.
You're going to jump at each other. Oh, man. Wow, there were apparently 5 battles of Ypres. I just remember going to Ypres. We went there.
Must be nice.
Horrible war. I think it was just a nice, boring trip.
Oh, I'm sure that this is something that other graduates of the American school system will echo here. But I feel like growing up World War I, we did have a unit on it in 7th grade. But until then, there was this pattern of like, it felt like we were going chronologically through American history, and we would like waste a bunch of time in the Industrial Revolution. And then it felt like the teachers were always like, skip ahead, World War II. And at the time, I was like, they're not managing their time well. And now I'm like, I think there's a reason we didn't really do much World War I in school, because it's like, yeah, and then everybody died for no reason. And that's hard to put a
World
spin
War
on
I
that.
maybe got Terminator 2'd a little bit, where the sequel is just so fucking big.
It's true. And
it's
memorable.
huge, and the stakes and like iconic villain,
It does. It has a great villain. It's true.
It's got an incredible villain. It's so easy to just sort of like get your mind around. There's a second Terminator. I get it. This guy's unstoppable.
Whereas, like the villain of World War I, it's like, European alliance structure, and every country kind of had a guy with a mustache who was rich and kind of evil, and you're like, oh, okay. And what happened afterwards? Nothing. Everyone still didn't like each other, and they just did it all over 20 years later. Like, yeah.
That's kind of what's most insane is you feel like the takeaway from World War I should have been, let's never do this again.
That's the war to end all wars. That was literally what they said. Yes.
They should have just called it World War. In a way, they were dooming us by calling it World War I. It's like, don't call it fucking Remo Williams'
Now,
The Adventure
Griffin,
Begins.
They didn't call it that.
They did, and the audacity. Fucking Doug's first movie over here.
Yeah, they dug no, but they did mess up because they called it the Great War, and everyone maybe mistook that after a while for like Great War. All right, can we do a greater war?
Sure.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We're
challenge.
making fun of a thing that is just an absolute moral calamity that resulted in the deaths of tens of millions.
Yeah.
But what are you supposed to do? How do you grapple with these things?
Yeah, war's terrible. Every time we fucking watch a war movie on this podcast, I just go, why is anyone doing this? Ever.
I frequently feel like I'm begging whatever listeners I have on any show I'm on forgiveness for like becoming too giggly when things are depressing and for like my very well developed sense of gallows humor. And this is the most appropriate movie we could talk
Yes.
with gallows humor about, because it's literally, you know, most of it takes place on the eve of an execution. So I feel like there's no more appropriate subject for this demeanor we're all exhibiting already.
Trench kind of nature's gallow, you know?
Yeah. It could be called trench humor.
It could be called trench humor.
This is not like a funny movie, obviously, but it is a movie about, you know, absurdity, right? The sort of like dark, surreal, like behavior.
There is something like very darkly comical about this movie. Like Dr. Strangelove pushes it into a level of absurdity where you can actually have jokes.
Right, it's cartoony.
But I feel like there's a much greater connection between those two films than I had considered before. And this just feels like it's sort of a clenched humor at like, this is so fucking stupid.
It's very stupid.
Yeah.
Griff, introduce our podcast and our guest.
Listen, the thing is that this is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce, baby. And this is a mini-series on the films of Stanley Kubrick. I saw people on the Reddit fighting about this the other day, because Brits say Kubrick, but apparently it is Kubrick.
I say Kubrick. Apparently that's English of me to call him Kubrick.
Right.
Kubrick.
Apparently it is Kubrick, and then when he went to England, people assumed it was Kubrick, and he didn't correct them.
Huh. What an interesting guy.
For a man who, you imagine, if they mispronounce his name, he'd go, can we get 100 more takes of that until you say it correctly?
While crying, ideally.
Absolutely. The miniseries is called Pods Wide Cast. Today we're talking about Paths of Glory, which is sort of the guarantor to the guarantor in his career.
Sort of. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly his first hit, right? I guess it wasn't even a huge hit, but it's a well-regarded movie with a star. That's a big deal.
It was certainly his first picture in terms of sort of classification and working with a big star and studio and everything. And then it opens the door for him to make a giant blockbuster later. But our guest today is the host of You're Wrong About, but I would say almost more relevantly, You Are Good, a movie podcast that is about movies and feelings. Is that how you would put it? It's sort of about the relationship between movies and emotions and our emotions to them and how they help us process our emotions. And am I totally butchering this? I've been listening to a lot of episodes recently, but I'm trying to figure out how to present this. This is certainly a movie that makes me feel emotions.
Yes. Oh my God. This movie is like 40 pounds of emotions in a 20-pound bag, I would say. And I am also looking forward to talking about how much you can get done in 87 minutes.
Kind of incredible.
But yeah, we have like refused to succinctly describe that show and left it up to other people. And it started off being about dad movies and dads in movies and working through dad feelings by watching movies. And then last year we were just like, let's just have it be about all feelings. But I think it also has a function of like a lot of the movies we talk about are sort of like feel-good movies or movies like aimed at or specifically beloved by tween girls. And there's also an element of talking about how like there is important things to discuss about practical magic.
Oh, I mean, you're preaching to the fucking choir here, David. This is David's this is the snare drum that David's beating all the time.
Practical Magic is a fantastic movie.
Thank you. Not everyone knows that. It's very sad for them.
And the thing about Practical Magic is
Sarah Marshall's our guest, by the way. I didn't get to the point where I said the name. Sarah Marshall's our guest today.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
that's
about
my
that.
name.
Yeah.
Oh, hi Sarah. Thank you for joining
Hi.
us, Sarah.
Thank you for
The
doing
thing
that.
about
Thank you for
Practical
having
Magic, and
me.
I can't remember if I've said this on mic, but I don't think I have. I'm a big fan of that movie and of Griffin Dunn's movies in general.
You've always been pushing for a Griffin Dunn miniseries. And I've always said there can only be one Griffin on this podcast.
And I saw it in theaters at the age of 12. Like I was a little young for it, I think. And also I was like a 12-year-old boy, like I don't know if I was like totally locked into this, like, but I was excited for it and I saw it and it really freaked me out when I was 12 years old in a theater. It's kind of a dark movie, which is sort of the secret of many a Griffin Dunn film.
There's a zombie in that movie. People forget that.
There's a fucking zombie. They raise the dead and it goes very poorly for them. Like it's not cute. Like, and so and then when I came back to it years later, I was like, yeah, God, there's nothing like this. It's such a strange tonal mix. And then I realized I felt the same about Addicted to Love. And like, I was like, oh, right. Like Griffin Dunn's that's kind of his thing, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, love Practical Magic. Would love to live in that house.
Did he just direct a new film, or am I mistaken?
He made a film called he worked on some kind of anthology film called Within that didn't go anywhere. But I believe the last thing he made was that Joan Didion documentary that went to Netflix. Yeah.
But I thought perhaps I'm mistaken here, and perhaps it was something he was acting in, but I felt like I was seeing him post online what felt like maybe his new film as a director. Like he just maybe finished something. Maybe I'm wildly wrong.
Let's see. I'm not. I mean, he has this segment in this thing called Within.
That must be, yeah.
But that's I don't know. And it's got like Don Cheadle in it. I don't know. It looks like Julianne Moore. It's got some real people in it. It's the kind of thing that premieres at Tribeca, though. Not to be rude.
Incredibly rude. Found dead in a trench. Sarah, you are someone who many people have been telling us to get on the podcast for a very long time. I feel like a lot of our mutual friends and our shared guests, like Dana Schwartz and Chris Gethard, Josh Gondelman and people, whenever they would go on your show, they'd reach out to us and say, like, have you had Sarah Marshall on? She would have a good conversation with you guys. And this is long overdue. It's been in the books for a while. It took a long time of back and forth to schedule and everything. But I'm curious, just because it's been pinned for so long, what made you choose this movie?
I think I gave you 3 options, and I forget what the third one was, but one of the other ones was Barry Lyndon. And you picked this one, and I was very relieved because I do love Barry Lyndon, but like just the idea of watching it, you just like kind of, it's like taxing in a different way. And this movie is, I don't know if you guys have this, but this is one of my favorite movies and one of my formative movies. And until watching it to talk about it with you, I had only seen it one time because I saw it once, and it was at the Portland Art Museum, which used to have free admission for Portland State students. And so I saw a lot of movies there. I saw this there and was just like, once was enough. Like the entire thing is like tattooed onto my brain now. It's like entered into my soul like an expanding bullet. I was like, yeah, I'm good. That was my shot or whatever. And so that's rare for me to not really revisit stuff like that. And I was excited to talk about it because I remember like seeing it alone in a theater and not really meeting a ton, like it doesn't come up that much in conversation, but it feels, my personal thought is that this is my personal Kubrick movie, however you want to say it. And watching it now, I was like, I feel like he just like got what human emotions were about and then was just like, I'm done with that. That was terrible. I'm going to make other stuff now.
It is funny how much his movies become more and more anthropological with every film after this,
Yeah.
right? It's sort of like he creates a greater distance between him and the subject and the microscope. And this one, it feels like he's really there. I don't know. I mean, doing these episodes, it's been really interesting to chart. And we haven't been doing the Kubricks in linear recording order, but sort of his start as a photojournalist into then becoming a documentary filmmaker, into becoming the most controlling fictional filmmaker. And the way the sort of documentary approach and styling and attitudes seep away with each film, you know?
Yeah.
He stops being someone who wants to capture something and starts being someone who wants to create and control a thing.
And watching this made me, I mean, this is a tendency of his that I have very conflicting feelings about. And I have conflicting feelings about The Shining, which I've talked about on You Are Good. But watching this, I was like, yes, like, go, Stanley, go be free, like, go identify with the robot.
Yeah, I guess this is his last human drama in a way.
In a
I think
way.
people would maybe object to us saying that. But
Yeah.
it is funny how this is certainly like, I don't think I saw this film until I'd probably seen all the later classics.
Mhm.
I had seen Strangelove 2001, Clockwork Orange at the very least, The Shining, right? Probably Barry Lyndon as well. And I came back around to this one and I think I had a different, I think I thought it was what the poster was telling me. I think I thought it was, like a really epic war movie with Kirk Douglas, probably similar to Spartacus in terms of like scale.
Right.
And then when I found out that it was basically like a legal drama of sorts, like, which is basically like my favorite genre of movie, like people talking shit out in a courtroom and like, maneuvering. I know that it's sort of an absurd legal drama and it's set within a legal system that makes no sense, but you know what I mean? Like that did surprise me. And I almost, I guess the closest thing he's made to this since this is Strangelove, because Strangelove is also people talking through absurdity by and large.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They're very paired movies, oddly. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And then of course in Strangelove, he's turning the dials up, right, and everything is ridiculous. But this is a ridiculous movie too. It's just that this is also rooted in reality, not in total absurdity.
It's also it's strange when you think about Kubrick as this guy who would just jump from one genre to another, a different style of film. I have to make my this, I have to make my that. I want to play in all these different sandboxes. And then you're like, he made like 4 proper war movies. He kind of kept coming back to war,
Barry Lyndon is kind of a war movie too.
Other movies outside of those 4 that touch on war seriously, but there are 4 films: this, Strangelove, Fear and Desire, and Full Metal Jacket.
I would count Spartacus as a war movie.
But that's what I'm saying. There are 4 movies that are explicitly war as main genre.
You're right.
And then you also go like Lyndon touches on war, Spartacus touches on war, It is kind of the dominant theme, or at least interest subject for him. And I think part of it is the way that like war exposes these odd aspects of the human condition and primal desires, fears and desires, if you will, and all these sorts of things. But this is the only one that's like through and through a war movie in a bizarre way.
And the fact that it's a weird kind of legal drama, watching this again, it's because I had seen it the first time, I don't know, 12 years ago, something like that. So it's like meeting who I was when I was much younger and sort of seeing how the way I felt about this movie predicted the kinds of things I would do with my adult life. And I was like, oh, of course I love this, because it's all about injustice, which I'm fixated on. And it's a legal drama. It's like, it feels like in a way, one of the few truly accurate legal dramas, because you have an incredibly short trial that you have 3 hours to prepare for. And the prosecution is extremely condescending and throws out everything of value that you have to say, which, as far as I know, is how actual trials tend to go, and we don't get to see it that way because it makes for unbelievably
boring.
depressing media.
Depressing. Right, yes.
Did you folks see that, like, David Simon cites this regularly as the number one influence on The Wire?
That makes sense. Sure.
That this was the movie he saw.
react.
Yeah, right. He's like the telling a story about how the institutions fuck over its people, and the people on the ground versus the people in the offices and all that sort of shit. That, like, this is the sort of Rosetta Stone, if you will, for him.
But also, and also, right, the life of being a middle manager in an institution that
Right.
can be violent and oppressive, which is always such a strange position. I mean, because the best thing about The Wire, well, there's lots of good things about The Wire, but like, is those middle manager characters who are often adversarial and villainous, but then also at the same time, are kind of just, like they're just doing the bidding of forces above them that are even more villainous and amorphous and all that. I don't know. Anyway,
It's sort of the most fascinating thing about this movie, though, is that it is like a middle management movie. It is a movie about middle management.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, kind of. You guys ever? You don't know, Griff, about Cardassians. I know, right? You never really got into the Cardassians in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm sorry to bring this up.
I'm sorry. We're doing this episode. We're doing this episode over Zoom, and it's a regular Zoom, technical, what have you. Both times you said it, I thought you said Kardashians.
Well, they sound. Yeah,
I mean,
they sound very similar.
It sounds like the alien race.
There's only so many Armenian characters in pop culture.
The alien race in Star Trek, the Cardassians,
Sure.
who are villains in The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine especially. There's an episode where, I think it's in Deep Space Nine, where a character is being put on trial. I can't remember which. It doesn't matter. Is being put on trial in the Cardassian legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, because
it
it's
still
the Federation.
sounds it sounds like you're saying the Robert Kardashian legal system. Go on.
Well, imagine the Kardashian legal system. That'd be pretty bad too.
It's probably not that different. And the Federation's like, look, okay, fine. Like, we'll get him a lawyer. Like, just tell, how does it work? And they're like, no, you don't understand. In our legal system, the trial is just an arena for us to yell at you. You're already guilty. Like, the guilt has been decided. And the trial is just where we now tell you that you're guilty and why and what's going to happen to you. And the Federation's like, well, come on, surely, is there an objection we can raise? Come on, like, what are the maneuvers we can do? They're like, no. Like, and so that's over with. That's dispensed with. And so that's what this is like.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'll defend my guys at the trial. And they're like, yeah, sure, buddy. You go ahead and do that. Like, that's fine. Like, nothing's going to change.
It is a big part of, I think, what makes my brain unravel whenever I watch war movies, as opposed to also, the many other things like a light breeze that can make my brain unravel. But
Sure.
that when I watch war movies, I'm like, what are these fucking rules? Who decide this fucking shit and everyone has to follow them? And then I extrapolate from there and I'm like, wait, but the rules outside of war also make no sense and are so arbitrary. And I'm like, what the fuck are any of us doing? But every time I watch a war movie, I'm like, says you, why do I have to fucking do this? Like, anytime anyone's commanded to do anything.
That certainly would be my reaction to be, to be told go over the top. I would be like, I don't know about that.
No.
My friend.
How about no? That doesn't serve my interests in any way.
This is why Falstaff is such a great character. Yes. He's like, war? I'm not sure about that. That sounds bad for me. And it's a sensible response.
Yeah, I mean, Falstaff's take is also like, well, I know that tents go with war that are filled with food and drink, so I can, I'll be in those. Like, if you want me to come to the war, like, I can hang out there maybe. But yeah, that'll be the extent of it.
It's weird that, like, Falstaff isn't shorthand for having the right opinion. You're like this Falstaffian genius who figured it out.
This free thinker who didn't get murdered like all of his friends and who died a lovely, peaceful death of lifestyle reasons.
It's right. You watch this movie. I mean, I think it illustrates this very well, but the idea of just like, I have a really smart move. I have this brilliant fucking 8-dimensional chess move in my head for how to win this war. Just push a bunch of human beings towards it. Just take a bunch of human lives and just push them all in one direction and hope that ultimately more of our guys are alive than their guys. And then, like, that doesn't work, and they're like, well, shrug. I don't know. What a shame.
Yeah. I've been on an action movie bender this summer, I guess, because it's summer and, like, that's what you do. And I was watching Die Hard the other day and enjoying, or like really noticing the fact that the FBI are like, yeah, we're going to lose 25% of the hostages, but like, that's pretty good for us. Like, that's fine. And just how it's unusual throughout history to not, see all this as a numbers game.
Yes, it is absurd.
I mean, those are my favorite side characters in Die Hard because like when they show up, it should be like, oh, great, the feds are here. They've got helicopters and stuff. Like, they'll kick this up too. They'll deal with this. And instead they show up and they're like, yeah, let's just fucking do it, man. Let's go guns blazing. And there's that moment where they're in the copter and the older agent is like, this reminds me of Nam. And the other guy's like, I wasn't in Nam, man. I'm too young for that. And you're like, oh, they're just idiots. Like, they're just completely violence addicted idiots.
Yeah. And how the older agent, like, this wouldn't be real for audiences for many years, but now the older FBI guy is like, for me and many other people, he's the guy from Showgirls. He just is the guy from Showgirls.
Yes.
So
Robert
that
Downey,
also helps.
Yeah. Anyway, makes me laugh when he says this reminds me of Nam. The other guy's like, what?
I mean, Die Hard is like what this movie would be in a way. If like, because like the whole premise of Die Hard is like, how much good can like one good guy manage to get done? And in Die Hard, the answer is all of it. And in this movie, the answer is none of it. And aside from that, they're the same.
So in 80 years, some progress made. Oh, God.
What, you got a heart out or something?
Click hello.
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 Do you know who I am?
No.
I know who you are.
Who are you?
I know who you are across all realities.
Oh my God, who are you?
Because I see everything that was, that is, and that could ever be.
Okay.
I am Watu the Watcher.
Oh, wow. From Marvel.
I ask what if.
Big head.
Possibilities, the likes of which mere mortals could never imagine.
Okay.
The wildest things.
That's true.
I blow your mind with some of these what ifs.
All right, so like, give me a what if, for example.
I don't know, what if Venom was the Punisher or some stuff?
Sure, great. Love
They're
it.
mind-blowing what ifs.
Who knew? Who knew such a thing could happen?
What if, like, the Human Torch went in a swimming pool?
I don't know. Probably
You
extinguished
couldn't
himself.
even imagine. No,
Oh, okay,
no,
sorry.
don't assume the outcome is that obvious. I mean, you're correct, but don't
I was
assume
right
every
that
time.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. What if Iron Man ordered a BLT for lunch?
I don't know. Delicious.
What? You're getting lucky here.
Okay, give me another what if.
We're all driven by what ifs, David.
Yeah. Give me another what if.
I have a what if I bet you could never answer.
Okay.
What if hiring didn't have to be so hard?
Well, I know the answer to that what if.
No, it's followed up by another question.
All right.
I'm going to increase the difficulty.
Come on, let's get these over with.
What if finding someone great could be as easy as asking them to apply? And now the third question, to foil you even more. What if your dream hiring platform already exists?
Exactly. The answer is in the question.
It's 3 different questions. There's no way you have an answer that fits all 3 questions.
You need Indeed.
God damn it. How?
Well, because I know it's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place, right? You're going to not spend hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills.
Yeah.
You got a powerful hiring partner that's going to help you do it all.
Uh-huh.
You're going to use life-saving tools like instant match assessments and virtual interviews.
Yeah.
With instant match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US.
You're just kind of blowing up my spot because my whole thing is that I'm the one who has the answers for what would happen.
I have more answers for you. It's the only job site where you pay for applications only that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring partner, delivering 4 times more hires than any other job sites, all of them combined, according to Talent Nest in 2019. 3 million businesses worldwide use Indeed to hire great talent fast.
Okay, but what would happen if Spider-Man missed the express train?
You'd get the local. Look, start hiring now. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/check. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/check. Indeed.com/check. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. Paths of Glory. I can give you some context, Griff, or do we want to talk about the plot?
No, let's dig into some context. Give me some context. I'm a connoisseur for it and of it.
I know you are. So The Killing had come out, and even though it wasn't a big hit, it was just, I think, like universally regarded internally, like in the industry, as like, this is someone to watch, right? Like this is a
filmmaker.
Major Hollywood
this is a
film.
real filmmaker. Yeah.
And so Harris Kubrick Productions, who, James Harris is Stanley's producer for all these early movies, they get a deal at MGM to write, produce, and direct a film in 40 weeks for a fee of $75,000. That's basically it. Do whatever you want, but that's the budget. That's the right. Like that's the fee. That's the timeline. They want to make a war movie because even though they've done Fear and Desire, Kubrick is just still completely fascinated by war. He calls it one of the few remaining situations where men stand up and speak for what they believe to be their principles. He says it's pure drama. So that's an interesting perspective on war. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but I guess I know what he means, that like it's just like so pressurized, that environment, right? I don't know, that you're like...
like reality TV cohabitation competition shows now.
Yes, exactly. That's where your principles come to the fore.
People start getting real. No, I think that's what I think it strips people down to the primal instincts. I think that's sort of what he's getting at, right?
Yes, right. Yeah. And there's this book, Humphrey Cobb's novel Paths of Glory. Kubrick had read it in high school, found it in his father's office, and just it was burned onto his, like he'd never forgotten it.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's one of the few books he read for pleasure when he was like a teenager. It actually has been made into a play before. So it's, it's like a known thing, and there have been attempts at cinematic adaptations, but what the problem with Paths of Glory is, guys? It's a bummer. It's a huge bummer. That's the reason that studios would be like, well, why are we doing this? It has like an unhappy ending, and it's like about how bad war is and what idiot generals are. It's like, should we be doing that? I guess that's what the problem is.
It's up there with Bicycle Thieves, I would say. Kubrick saw Bicycle Thieves and he was like, hold my beer.
Yeah. Nobody is interested. They bring in Jim Thompson, who writes, who wrote wait, what did
Killer
he write?
Inside Man.
No, I know, but like he wrote The Killing, right? Yes, he wrote The Killing, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
they're bringing back Jim Thompson. He adapts it. No one is interested except for Kirk Douglas, who liked The Killing, reads the script, and he says, Stanley, I don't think this movie is ever going to make a nickel, but we have to make it. So Kirk Douglas is the one guy who's basically like, I guess, got enough clout at this moment that he's like, well, I want to do something interesting. And he reads the script and he's like, I can get this made, and I'm sure no one wants to make it. So it is kind of impressive.
$1 million budget based on Kirk Douglas's name. $300,000 goes to Kirk Douglas.
Correct. He got a third of the budget. That's right. But hey,
Michael needs tennis lessons.
Right.
Michael's backswing sucked at that time.
No, he did. No, he was always slicing it. At one point, Kirk Douglas is busy and maybe can't do it, and they try to get Gregory Peck involved, which also makes sense. Like, he's also pretty logical for a movie like this, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a guy with a backbone, right? Like a guy where you're like, I could see him sticking up for these guys, right?
Well,
like,
it's so much the Atticus Finch thing of like, oh, Gregory Peck is the most moral, immovable man. He is the great good of American culture. Whereas there's something about the exact thing that I feel like Kirk Douglas actually shows a lot of restraint in playing against in this movie, but that we carry over as sort of legacy for him, of the clenched teeth, the gripping hands, the fucking poster image. It gives this movie an edge where you're like, I know how big this guy can go. I know the histrionics. Whereas Gregory Peck always felt kind of selfless,
And he's and Gregory Peck is like more conventionally handsome, and Kirk Douglas is handsome in his way, but is like has this very weird, intense, angular look. I don't know. What are your Sarah? What's your Kirk Douglas take? Do you like Kirk Douglas as an actor? Seems like an intense human being.
As an actor, yeah. I feel like Gregory Peck's screen presence is the sort of like safe daddy feeling where like if you're like a child on a lifeboat with him, he'll like keep you singing songs and like not panic. Whereas if you're on a lifeboat with Kirk Douglas, like you're going to be drinking seagull blood and singing sea shanties, and like he's going to level with you. Like there is something. It's like I think he's playing like an immovably good man, but not a paternal one.
Yes.
And you're going to be drinking and carousing as much as you can out there.
Both ways you learn stuff.
You do. You do. They're both teachers. Yeah.
I think we've talked about this, Griffin. We probably talk about it a little more on Spartacus, but like, you know, he's like a new Hollywood star before new Hollywood. That's how I've always thought of Kirk Douglas. Like,
right. Yes.
He's almost a man out of time, right? Like when you see him in things like this or The Bad and the Beautiful or Ace in the Hole or whatever, you're like, there's no one like this in the 50s, right? Like this is a harder edge. He feels like almost like a 70s actor, or he straddles it.
Yeah.
Yeah. My insomnia YouTube rabbit hole of this week has been watching Inside the Actor Studio, and I watched the Harrison Ford one last night. And you know, Harrison Ford is like so loath to talk about his process and his craft and all that sort of
shit. Or to talk at all, right? And like even Lipton is like, we really appreciate you doing this because we know this is not the kind of thing you like doing. And at the end of the interview, he like goes in really tight for a handshake with Lipton. It's clear that he's like, thank you. But there's a stretch of it that's really interesting. It's sort of what you're talking about, where they talk about the Mosquito Coast, which I think he says is his favorite movie he made. And Lipton is trying to sort of not prod him, but push him on the like, you've obviously lived a very lucky life. You're a very wealthy man. You're very famous. You're very successful. You're very respected. Does it ever feel like a burden that you are Harrison Ford? And sometimes when you try to make a movie like Mosquito Coast, people will not let you, or they will not accept it. They will reject it because they have such a specific idea in their head of who Harrison Ford is and what he represents. And Harrison Ford, in a very unself-pitying way, is like, yes, that is the thing I fight with. And he said, I have always gotten the sense that you use the fact that you have these big franchises and these blockbusters to single-handedly get these movies made that would not get made otherwise, but you kind of know selflessly that you're not really going to get credit for it, that people will struggle with you being seen or wanting to be seen in that way, and the movies will lose money. And he just sort of says, like, I think there's the assumption that when I make a movie like that, I'm hoping it performs like one of my blockbusters. And the reality is I'm making it so that it can be made. And Douglas, like, Harrison Ford was kind of trying to keep the Douglas tradition going. But the difference is by the time you get to Harrison Ford already, and obviously things go so much further afield in the decades past that. Yeah, but it's right. You're already, the opening weekend is already, you're a slave to it or whatever. Right. Yeah.
It's bifurcated because he's fucking Indiana Jones and he's Han Solo and whatever. And there was this moment where Kirk Douglas could be a guy who could like pick interesting directors, pick thorny material, but work within these major genres of the war picture, the historical epic, the Western, what have you, and make these morally ambiguous movies that still basically could be sold as mainstream to mainstream audiences. Some of them worked hugely, some of them didn't work, but he was able to constantly try to make the challenging movie rather than being like, I got to make a dumb one to justify making the tricky one, you know?
Well, everything you've said, let me now tell you what happened when they started to shoot the movie, because this feeds into that perfectly, which is that Douglas shows up. They're in Munich. I think they shot the movie in Germany. And he's greeted by Stanley and Jim Thompson. They had rewritten the script, and Kirk Douglas says it's a catastrophe. They'd taken this beautiful script and they'd ruined it. They had stupid dialogue. The dialogue he quotes sounds really funny, such as, "You've got a big head. You're so sure the sun rises and sets up there in your noggin, you don't even bother to carry matches." I mean, this is all from Kirk Douglas.
That's a thinker.
It's like such an overcomplicated metaphor.
But by the way, that's like the kind of dialogue that like rules in The Killing. You understand when they're coming off of like two fucking hard-boiled noirs. Yeah.
Of course. Hard-boiled, weird dialogue. Right. But the most important change is that the movie suddenly has a happy ending. The general's car arrives screeching to halt the firing squad. He commutes the death sentence. And Douglas calls Stanley and Harris to his room and says, "Why did you do this?" And Stanley Kubrick, which he says, this is how Douglas puts it. He had a very calm way about him. I never heard him raise his voice. I never saw him get excited. He just looked at me with his big wide eyes and he said, "I did it to make a commercial. I want to make money." And Kirk Douglas just flipped out at them and was like, "I only wanted to do this because of the script you showed me. We are shooting that script where I'm walking off this picture." And Stanley Kubrick was like, "That's fine." And they made the original picture. So this is, yeah.
Right. It's fascinating that, like, yeah, Kubrick had sort of gotten in his head of like what a Kirk Douglas movie needs to be. And Kirk Douglas was like, "I don't want to make Kirk Douglas movies. I want to be Kirk Douglas and use that to make other movies."
Yeah, exactly.
This reminds me of a story I love from the production of Titanic, where like they were going over time, they were going over budget. Fox sent down somebody to talk to James Cameron and was like, "Listen, just cut these scenes, like don't shoot them. You'll get back on schedule that way. It'll be great." And James Cameron, according to legend, was like, "The only way to change my movie is to fire me, and the only way to fire me is to kill me."
I believe I've heard that story, and I believe it. I believe it 100%. Him just staring someone down and being like, "Do you have a gun? Because that's the only way you're going to make this happen.
I have a tough neck, so you're not going to be able to strangle me.
Even a knife will bend."
Yeah.
The thing is that's interesting, and I feel like our researcher JJ has found this in a bunch of these dossiers, a bunch of the research for these movies, like even the later ones. Stanley Kubrick always seems more concerned about making films that are commercial and successful than making films that are like, he doesn't care about critics' respect that much.
No.
He's not like, "Oh my God, I have to please that," like he seems a lot more concerned with like, "Well, I want it to be a hit because then I can make more movies." Like,
yeah, it's interesting because it felt like that was the most important thing to him, but in a weirdly practical way of like, if the movie bombs, then it's over. And I think more than that he knew he had such a particular way of making movies, was so demanding that the moment those films stopped being profitable, it's sort of the Cameron thing of like, what's a worse fate for him than not being able to make a movie is not being able to make a movie the way he wants to. Not being able to demand that level of control, that scale, those resources, that time. And the only way he keeps justifying that is if the last thing worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, seemed to not give a shit about critics or awards at all.
No, not really. No, yeah, not someone who really cared about the Oscar or whatever. They shoot it in Germany, in Munich. Kubrick's marriage to Ruth Sabatka is on the rocks, and he meets Christiane Suzanne Harlan, who is the singer at the end of the film. At the end of Paths of Glory.
I don't think I'd put that together.
Yep. Who he marries, and they are married until he dies. So they are married for 30 plus years. That is his longtime companion. And it's an incredible ending. The ending of this movie is incredible. I mean, it's so sort of unexpected and amazing. And so that whole like divorce and then kindling of a new romance plays out in the background of him making Paths of Glory. And then, a lot of the other stories from the set of this movie, I don't know if this is going to shock you, Griffin, is about Stanley Kubrick making actors do lots of take to their increasing frustration. Have you heard about this?
Yes. I've read about this a few times now.
I'm not dragging JJ. I know, like, this is what always comes up. He's like, whatever people recollect, like, what was it like to work with Stanley Kubrick? They're always like really serious, played a lot of chess, kind of cold behind the eyes, lots of takes. Like, that's what always comes up.
Yes.
So yeah, Paths of Glory. Let's talk about it. It's a great war film. It's the great World War I film. I don't think there's any disputing that, right? Like, what would its competition be? Like, All Quiet on the Western Front.
I can't even think of another film. Yeah. Well, that one. I haven't seen that one. Yeah. I'm out.
I haven't seen it either. Have you seen it, David?
I have. Yes. It's very good. And I feel like it's obviously it's from like 1930, right? It's a pre-code movie. That it's just sort of the definitive, like, here is a fairly unsanitized Hollywood vision of what, like, how tough it was doing, in World War I. It's not jingoistic or sanded down. It's a really intense, sad movie. And it's good. It's good. It's like, it's good. I'm a film critic, professional film critic. I keep pointing as if that's going to help.
It's good.
Me saying it's good. It's very good.
David gives it 1 point.
One point. I just think then I think of things like The Lost City of Zed, or movies that have World War I sequences that are very impactful, but are not entirely about the war. Like it's more like the aesthetics of the trenches and the gas attacks and all that. I guess like 1917, became.
Well, look, I mean, I thought about 1917 a lot watching this movie just because the amount of trenchy shit, right? Like that's the most trenchy movie we've had in recent history. But the one whistleblowing sequence with Douglas for me is so much more harrowing and tense than anything in 1917, which is all about, it's fucking unrelenting, one shot, doesn't end, you're stuck there with him.
Yeah.
And he's not doing any cinematic trickery of that style. It's a very unfussy, he's just sort of tracking with him, at a relative speed. But there's something about and with cuts, like, but it's somehow the way the tension builds in that you feel, at least for me, I felt a greater sense of, without trying to put you in a sort of you are there place. How the fuck do you get out of this?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You just hope to survive, right? You just hope your number doesn't come up.
Yeah,
I don't know how else to think about it.
Yeah, no, truly, you just fucking walk in with a whistle, just going like, "Look, guys, how many more steps do I have to take? All I have to do is avoid 35 more bullets, and I'm good."
Do you guys have any relatives that fought in wars?
My grandfather fought in World War II.
Mm-hmm. Might as well.
Yeah, my grandfather, I think, organized the USO shows in World War II.
That is such a Griffin Newman
I know,
grandfather
right?
thing.
Yep.
Oh my God. Wait,
Yep.
that's
He
incredible.
bravely fought in World War II, and then you cut to this guy being like, all right, so you're going to open, and this guy's going to middle, and, and it's a rough crowd out there tonight.
Hey, Bob Hope was very rude behind the scenes. That was a tough gig, all right? You got PTSD from that.
The wildest thing about it is my grandfather absolutely looked like someone who personally strangled 50 people to death on the front lines in the war. My grandfather looked like fucking Bob Hope as like a thug. Was like a big stocky guy with like a mean face. And then when I say, he organized USO shows, you're like, it was just Griffin in the war. And I was like, no, my grandfather like looked like an angry man.
I don't know about World War I. I think my guess is that for my dad's dad was too old to fight in World War II. My dad was born during World War II. And so my guess is like there was a similar generational thing where like maybe, but I don't know about my father's side of the family. And then my mom's side of the family during World War I, they were like, penniless immigrants or whatever. So I don't have any World War I family stories for sure.
Sure.
I don't know that.
I found out my family, it's like pretty much up until, just not the Vietnam, but like Korean all the way back.
They were
even Revolutionary
served in the
War. They served in all these wars. And it's just like,
you got one of those American families that goes all the way to the Revolutionary, right? You're all the way back.
Well, there's the house in New Jersey that has been in your family for like 6 generations, right?
Yeah, it's a house in New Jersey.
Yeah, okay.
What are you going to do with that?
A lot, Barry
Bury some
jeans.
jeans.
That's true.
I think my future invention is going to be a time travel app where you can like go back in time to visit your relatives and pressure them into buying real estate and just be like, here's $20, buy a bunch of acres. I'll check in on it later.
You don't know what the East Village is. Just trust me.
I talk about this all the time. The movie Brooklyn, where like they're like, we're gonna get out of here. We're gonna sell this Brooklyn Heights brownstone, disgusting, and move to Long Island. And I'm like, no, hold on to it. Oh my God, that thing is a gem. You're gonna get millions.
Also, but like those stories you always hear about, like an artist who had like a fucking studio in Soho or like Chinatown in the 70s or the 80s, and the landlord's like, I don't know, you want to buy this whole building? What do you got in your pockets right now? I can't be bothered with this thing.
It's a hassle owning it. You might as well take it.
But yeah, I just asked because it's like World War II, World War I. they seem justified. It makes sense why our relatives did this heroic, honorable thing. But then we've been discussing throughout this episode, why would anyone ever fight in a war? Especially the way this movie presents war as just like the sort of nasty side of it, the like, I don't know, the probability, the math, the like the coldness of it all.
I don't know. Like growing up, as I was always like, I don't know, I don't get it. I'm not a boy, so I won't be drafted, so I don't have to make peace with it at any time. Not that there's been a lot of drafting in our lifetimes. But yeah, no, I never, something I've never gotten is like the initial appeal of it, you know, the like first 20 minutes of Born on the 4th of July or whatever, where it's like, where you're like, I'm going to go to war and I'm going to fight and I'm going to have adventures and I'm going to distinguish myself. And then you get there and you see what it actually is. And I'm curious about like, I guess I've like never understood what illusions do people have going into it, specifically as infantry. It's like you must know that the odds are that you will die horribly almost immediately. And so like, what is the, and like knowing that on some intellectual level, like what do you think will happen to you that allows you to actually do it?
Right. Why will you be invincible for whatever? I mean, I do think from what I studied just in World War I, I feel like it's widely, covered that like everyone going into that was like, this is going to be fucking 6 months flat. Like we are going to be in and out. Like
just like with COVID, just a bunch of celebrities sing a song, 6 weeks playing Monopoly. Right. We're fine.
Yeah. Everyone in Germany and Britain especially was just like, come on, boys, let's all sign up. They are telling me that these guys basically just have pickles in their hands. We are going to wipe them out and it's going to be great. And we come home and we're heroes. And then instead, everyone's like, yo, everyone seems to have machine guns and tanks all of a sudden. We got to dig holes and really hunker down. This sucks. And like, it's this.
Now I'm just like imagining like Fatty Arbuckle making like the Nickelodeon version of the Imagine video. Calling in like Rudolph Valentino.
and there's no sound. They're just
right.
like
all those guys
very
were there.
Dramatically. You're like, I'm sure they sound great. So
And, obviously World War II is different because World War II is like there's this global evil we have to confront. World War I, everything I ever studied about it in school. And in school, basically, I was taught about the origins of World War I. And then we jumped right to afterwards. Like they were like, we're not going to actually teach you about the war. It's too complicated and boring at the same time. Like, right. That's not for high schoolers. We'll just do origins, you'll learn about Franz Ferdinand and all that. And then we're going to do the Treaty of Versailles and all that. Like, and then we go right to World War II, the Depression and all that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you watch Titanic at your grandma's house and you finish the first tape and you're like, and then what? And you're like, and then they got safely to their destination, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And it arrived and everyone got off in the normal way, down the stairs and so on and so forth. So it was great.
All I got was this lousy t-shirt. No, it's right. Look, I like Full Metal Jacket more than you, David, although we haven't gotten to that episode yet. I'm curious to rewatch it. But it is the thing that I think Full Metal Jacket does particularly well is you sort of understand the way these systems are built to hype these young men up into not only is this a noble thing to do, but like you're going to come out of this being so fucking powerful and badass,
And the imaginary world of boot camp where, learn to put your gun together, learn to march. Yeah, right. And then like the reality of it being just this like hell.
All the jelly donuts you want.
Right. But it's this idea, not just like, I mean, the way in our society, obviously, we like we're told to pay such reverence to soldiers, without necessarily properly supporting them. But also the sort of idea of like, this is going to turn you into such a high functioning person, that's so often, I mean, we're talking in modern terms, the military this is your pathway if you can't afford college and you don't have a career path and you don't know what your thing is, and you're going to come out of here and you're going to be able to do anything, And I do think you talk about why these people show up and they get to war and they're just like, I'm going to fucking win this. I'm going to be a hero. It's because, there's a whole system built up for these kinds of things. I mean, what this movie is so good at depicting is when the sort of the illusion falls apart for these people, you know? When the sort of narrative that they've been sold starts to dissipate and people start actually critically viewing the things around them and questioning the orders and all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Ack.
Hello.
I'm so stressed out. I feel like Kathy.
Are you Kathy?
I feel like her.
Oh, you're not actually her though.
I'm not.
Chocolate.
But I get confused. Sometimes when I'm craving for chocolate and feeling stressed out, little lines are coming off my head. I'm saying ack. It's because I'm at the post office.
Oh,
It turns me into a regular Kathy.
It's not because Ira was mean to you. Is that his name? I can't remember what her boyfriend's name is. Is it Ira?
Timberlake played him on Weekend Update.
Is that right?
And then
Irving. It's Irving.
oh, of course
Irving.
it is.
Yeah. Sorry, not Ira. Anyway, what's the problem? Oh yeah, you're stressed out by the post
office. Could turn anyone into a Kathy. Is the point here? Even a notoriously
all right.
chill
Well, you know
dude
what?
like
you know
myself
what?
gets turned into a Kathy in line at the post
Yeah,
office.
well, you need to go to stamps.com. It's your 24/7 post office that you can access from anywhere.
Skip
You'll
the
skip
headache.
the headache.
No axe. That's what I say. No axe with stamps.
Look, for more than 20 years, stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. It gives you access to all the post office and UPS shipping services you need right from your computer, and you get discounts you can't find anywhere else, like up to 30% off USPS rates and 86% off UPS.
That still feels like the highest discount we ever plug on this show.
So high.
86% off is hella high. Whether you're an office sending invoices, an Etsy shop sending your products, or a warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com makes mailing and shipping a breeze. All you need is your regular pooter and printer. No special supplies or equipment, plus Stamps.com seamlessly works with Shopify, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, and more. You're up and running minutes, print official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want. You can even order shipping supplies through Stamps.com, including free priority mail envelopes and boxes. David, this next section is mandatory.
Don't mail and ship the hard way. Sign up with Stamps.com today. Sign up with the promo code CHECK for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale. There's no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code CHECK. Paths of Glory. This movie is about a general who wants his soldiers to take over a position called the Anthill. His French soldiers, they're all French. Everyone in this movie, of course, is French, and it's very obvious that they're French. That's a joke about the accents.
They sing "oh ho ho" the whole time. It's great.
They hated this movie in France. It's funny to read just like how vicious the fucking reviews were. And mostly because of that. They were just like, he's taken so much care and effort to replicate all the details, and it's all American actors making no effort to seem French.
But it wouldn't, I mean, this is like such a device, like everybody attacks us differently, but like I don't know. I think just having them all sound sort of generically American is the least obtrusive thing you can do. But
I agree. I think it's way better than watching Kirk Douglas or whoever, try to,
do a pan-European accent sounding like Christopher Lambert in Highlander.
Right. Because I think when I see that happen, it makes even less sense to me, where I'm like, why are they speaking English with French accents? Like, I pretty much think there are two ways to go about this. There's the Inglourious Bastards way, where you're just like, everyone's actually going to speak the language they would speak, and I will cast actors of that nationality for the roles. And very few people are given the creative and artistic freedom at that budget scale to get away with doing that. And otherwise, I think pretty much always the best approach is, actors, bring your own accent. We just are going to tell you where they're supposed to be from, and everyone just do your thing.
I mean, like, it's the huge problem with Valkyrie. I mean, that's not like that movie is just okay anyway. But, everyone is just using their accents in that movie.
See, I kind of like it in Valkyrie.
I don't like it in Valkyrie because I don't know why Cruz is American and everyone else is British. Everyone should be British. Like, British people playing Nazis, that's fine. That happened for decades. That's
Sure.
how they, that's cinematically, essentially how Americans represent Nazis on screen. But then to have Tom Cruise in there makes it odd. Like, anyway, it doesn't matter. The weirdest approach, of course, is what Oliver Stone did with Alexander, where he was like, the Macedonians will speak in Irish accents. That's why Colin Farrell can use his natural accent, but then I will make Val Kilmer put on a bizarre Irish accent.
Right.
And then everyone else will speak in English accents except for Angelina Jolie, who will do like a Russian accent. And you're like, but none of these people, wait a second. You're like, you can't just say that Irish means this. Like, that doesn't, anyway.
You know what I want to see? I'm sorry I'm like dragging us further on this tangent, but like,
No, please. We love tangents.
Hollywood loves doing Boston accents so much. I do feel like we backed off it
Boston
slightly
War
in the past
movie.
couple years. Yes. Yeah. Let's do the Trojan army, but they all sound like they're in The Departed.
But that's right. That's what it is. You're doing some ancient war, and half the people talk one way, but you have all the Spartans or Boston, all the Trojans, whatever. You pick a country.
You remake Paths of Glory with Mark Wahlberg, and everyone else has to do a reverse Wahlberg,
Yes.
reverse engineered Wahlberg accent.
That's what the people want.
Well, they're all French, and General Brouillard, who is a sort of friendly fellow, friendly kind of, older guy with a mustache, is like, can you please take the anthill? And this guy, General Miro, who's got like a big scar and is kind of scary looking, is like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, that's fucking impossible. And Brouillard's like, yeah, but you could get like a promotion out of it. And he's like, all right, well, we'll just do it. And that's the best part to me, is it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out how we'll do it. He's just like, yeah, okay, well, I'll just go tell them to do it, and they better fucking do it, because otherwise I'll be embarrassed. Right? Like, he doesn't really have any more to offer them.
It's the weird like corporate ladder thing of
Right.
of war, where like all of these people fought at some point, right?
Sure.
And have now been promoted to the cushy office where they're not at risk anymore. And immediately when you get the security of the four walls around you, you no longer have any empathy for the people who are in the position that you just escaped.
Right. I did it. How hard could this be? And it's like, well, you didn't fucking live in a trench like we do. Yeah.
Right. How many people do I have to throw at this problem to increase my sense of security in my current position, or even rise to a higher position? George McCready, who is who is the scarred gentleman, as you were saying, Miro. This is a real scar that he had. I was trying to get a sense of this because I was looking up other films of him and headshots, and it feels like in other films they tried to downplay it and cover it up a little bit, and in this film they embellished it. But it is basically a real scar that size that I think they make look a little more intense. That he got like driving in college. He like got into like a car accident as like a frat boy, but it makes him.
It so looks like a dueling scar, right?
Exactly. It's like fucking perfect for this. And this fucking guy owned an art gallery with Vincent Price. He and Vincent Price were best friends, and the two of them in Beverly Hills owned an art gallery that was half them being like, well, this is like fun. We have like a place to hang out rather than buy a bar. Let's buy an art gallery. But they also were like big supporters of like up and coming young artists. And their place was like this fucking celebrity hotspot to buy art, where like fucking Greta Garbo would come out of her cave that she was living in seclusion to look at the fucking paintings that McCready and Price had on display. Could you just imagine walking into an art gallery and hearing those two voices talking to each other? And it was just these two actors with their pencil thin mustaches and slicked back hair and fucking monster voices. You're looking at modern art in Beverly Hills.
And then what if you're in the like weird celebrity business district and you're like, okay, this is great. This is really great stuff out of my price range. I'm going to go buy some socks from Peter Lorre now.
Yes, yes.
You're right. I'm going to Laurie's knitting emporium. Yes, I've been working on some scarves. He's just like behind the thing with two needles. I don't know. This guy also, George McCready, the guy you're talking about, has just a fabulous Wikipedia picture, Griffin. Are you seeing this thing?
It's unbelievable. Yes, yes.
He's in. It's a headshot from this movie called Johnny Allegro, which is a great movie. Title. Like that's a great title. Some George Raft gangster movie, and he just looks. he looks very patrician, but he looks great. He's got this bow tie and this kind of tweed jacket. He looks great.
This is
Wow.
the IMDb trivia fact from Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter. They opened their gallery. It was called The Little Gallery. They opened it in 1943. Their customers included Charles Lawton, Tallulah Bankhead, Barbara Hutton, Fanny Brice, Katharine Hepburn, and Greta Garbo. I know they probably weren't all there at the same time, but I just like to imagine an opening cocktail hour with those fucking voices. That sounds
So
like
delightful.
it sounds like a premise for like a fucking SNL sketch where everyone gets to show off the
Yes.
impression they have in their back pocket.
I mean, I also love Adolphe Menjou, the guy playing the top general guy,
Yes.
the sort of, Frenchy guy, who is another absolute legend. Like he was in The Shake, like the old Rudolph Valentino movie. Like he was in A Star Is Born. He was nominated for an Oscar for The Front Page. He looks like kind of like serious Peter Sellers. Is that crazy for me to say?
No, that's fair. Yes.
Kind of like dramatic Peter Sellers with a stash and all that.
He looks like how Peter Sellers tries to make himself look.
Apparently, Salvador Dali was a big fan of his
Interesting.
and declared that he had one of the best mustaches. So, and that's from a
Wow.
mustache guy.
Yeah.
That's a huge compliment.
He was also a total politically. He was a huge jerk who was very Republican and was very fond of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. I should acknowledge that.
He was anti-polio vax.
He also he's the one who tore it up with Kubrick the most, because I guess he's
Okay.
probably the biggest veteran. Where Kubrick at one point was like, "All right, take 42, guys," and he was like, "You don't know what you're doing. You're 29 years old. Like, you don't know how to direct actors." And Kubrick listened to him and then just said quietly, "It isn't right, and we're going to keep doing it until it is right, and we'll get it right because you guys are good."
Where's the one I found here? He did 17 takes, Manju, and then he said, "That was my best reading. I think we can break for lunch now." Kubrick said he wanted another take. Manju went until he fucking tazzed out, right? Was yelling at everyone like full Christian Bale on-set breakdown. And then he just let him stop. And then Kubrick said, "All right, let's try the scene once more." And
He's just a stone wall,
Right,
even though
right.
he's like a baby.
just ice
Yeah.
cold. And Manju went like, "Okay." And it just did it again. Like he would just fucking outplay people just by being unwavering.
I think the casting of that guy is fantastic because he is likable. Like you
Yeah.
are genuinely kind of charmed by him. He's this avuncular fella, and he's maybe not just as evil as Miro, but he's this benign evil person, right? Like he
seems more sane than Miro, which makes him more evil at this point. Yeah,
Right.
because Miro just seems to be fully losing it, accountable to no one.
right. Miro is so lost in his own like vanity of like, I can't be embarrassed by
Yeah,
this.
he's our Trump. He's like, let's fire on our own, yeah.
Right. I mean that's the whole sequence that plays out in the movie. Obviously, is they try, Colonel Dax, who is Kirk Douglas, is like, "We're just gonna die if you do that. Like, if you send us up there." And he's like, "Well, jolly good, pat on the back. It's that way. It's about east southeast from here, so give it a shot."
Think of England or
and they-
France or wherever we're from.
Right? Yeah. And the attack on the anthill is a complete failure, and Miro orders his guys to open fire on his own troops to force more of them onto the battlefield. And right, I mean that's the main thing that happens. There's the sort of side plot about the nighttime mission
Mhm.
that goes wrong, but the main thing is just Miro losing it over them not following his orders. And he's like, "Great, we'll just court-martial them all for cowardice." And the insane decision is made to try 3 men sort of as proxy for everybody.
Right. To make an
One
example
for
out of
each
them.
company.
Yeah.
And that is mostly what this movie is about.
The main cinematic filmmaking conceit of this movie, which is very simple, but just executed so well, is like in that whole opening office sequence, Kubrick's doing what later kind of becomes his definitive style of this sort of icy remove, super wide shot, deep focus, focusing on the silence. The only other ambient noise you hear is the echo of the people's voices in these rooms. and such clarity in the details of every fucking bauble on their walls, on their desks. And then when you go into war, it is the most claustrophobic thing. It is this like constant barrage of noise, the drums and the gunshots and whatever. And the disparity between the people making these decisions and the people who are forced to actually live through them. The remove that the people in the offices have away from the people who are on the battlefields. And even, I just think he's so deliberate about when you get to the execution at the end, not to jump ahead, he shoots it with the same sort of intensity and claustrophobia of when they are on the battlefield or when they're in the trenches, even though they are outdoors. And even something like the jail cell where they're being kept before the execution, he shoots more like one of the general's offices because there is actually a sense of security there, even though they know their death is imminent. To like, well, but they're safe from the fucking shooting, at least until they are marched out and shot. But I just think the use of sound in this movie is so smart. And the sort of the Kubrickian control of the language of it's so much about the spaces and the energy of the spaces and the difference between where you are safe and secure and have the most power, Even just the calm with which this whole opening dialogue scene plays out. How casually they get to talk about everything, that when you first cut into the trenches and you're introduced to Kirk Douglas, a man who never, ever seemed chill, whose face is tense.
I think that the sets are doing such an incredible amount of work here. I was noticing that just watching this again for today. And yeah, just how there's like one of the questions that I feel like anyone making a movie should ask themselves is like, why is this a movie? Why is this not a play or a book? But like the amount of work, I think that, and this is what seems one of the things that seems so smart to me, where it's like, you can like, if you're doing any creative project, you can like feel like you're really getting something done because you're doing it in a very laborious way, and possibly many, many takes is one way of doing that, arguably. But like, just, I feel like it takes a lot of creative security to let something be easy for you. And just like the amount of work that those interiors do in the opening minutes for the audience of just like, you just know in your bones, you're like, these people have no idea what they're talking about, because how could you if you're surrounded by beautiful rooms and beautiful things, and like no part of you is even thinking about whether this gash on your arm is going to get infected any second now.
Yeah, it's incredible that it actually, as sort of banal as that those opening scenes are, it's building tension because you just know the second he actually cuts into the battle,
Yeah.
it's immediately going to feel so absurd. Yeah.
It's like the opening of any horror movie where the
Right.
family's having a great vacation.
And you're like, this
and
isn't
you're like,
gonna
I'm
last.
so stressed out by this great vacation.
Right. And if you're setting this as one end of the polar extreme,
God, it is so crazy though. Why did they do this? Why
it's
were
so
they
dumb.
doing this shit, man? It's really dumb. It is the dumbest. It's the dumbest war of all time. Like I think any military expert
So
probably agrees. Where
far.
it's like yeah, well, right, exactly. But in
Okay,
terms
so
of like,
we're solving this, right? We're doing it, guys.
We're
We
fixing
are,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
in terms of amount of people dead versus like goals achieved.
Yes.
It's like the disparity. Even if you think any goal achieved in war is bad, like this one is really like no goals, so many dead. No, but yeah, I was just literally watching a clip of Paths of Glory, like just to remind those shots of him stalking through the trenches with all the guys lined on either side, and they just all look so miserable. And then like there are moments where he sort of goes under a bridge or something, and it gets really dark for a second. That's the Kubrick shit where you're like, it's not just attention to detail, and it's not just recreating something fairly accurately, like the experience of it, but just it's so like chillingly, awfully atmospheric. It's so cool. Not cool. Cool is the wrong word. Upsetting.
Yes. This is the movie where he really starts to develop the understanding of how I can use cinematic technique to make the audience feel a very specific thing very viscerally. Which so often with Kubrick is, how do I make them feel uncomfortable? How do I make audiences miserable? Yeah.
But then, of course, the whole movie is these general guys being like, you guys are really embarrassed me up there. And I'm like, did you just watch what they like? Are you kidding me? Like, the worst thing that could ever happen to you just happened to all these guys. And the general's like, I'm gonna have to put you on trial. I mean, and we're gonna have to talk about this. And just the extreme absurdism of them being like, could I say something in my defense, maybe? And they're like, no, I don't think so. It's pretty obvious. You got, that it makes it. I don't know. It does make all that like very gentle dialogue.
It's toxic power dynamics. Okay, like I'm sorry, I've got to say it. It's very toxic.
Can I say it?
You're right. It's very toxic.
War is toxic.
What they're doing is
war is toxic.
Very problematic.
It's so problematic. Sir, you were saying that this was like your Kubrick movie. This is the one that really like has stuck with you in your life. What is your relationship to war movies in general? Like, do you feel like, because I think David is more interested in war films than I am, and I struggle with them just because of the amount of panic they give me.
That's a good question. I mean, the first thing that makes me think of is I remember going on a trip with my friend and her family when I was 13, and we were on a boat, but it was like a houseboat boat that you can move around a lake, and it had a little TV and VCR and like the sort of like standard cottage selection of VHS tapes. So I remember watching Thelma and Louise and Finding Private Ryan, which I almost just call Good Will Hunting, but that's not. No, Saving Private Ryan. See, I can't even remember what it's called. It made a huge impression.
They do
on
find
me.
him.
My favorite movie.
They do find him.
They did. Also, they should have done Saving Good Will Hunting, the Damon verse.
Yes, and Saving Bobby Fischer, and
yes.
all of it. And I remember just like not knowing how to find a way into that movie. And I have not attempted to watch it again since I was 13 or however old I was at the time. But yeah, and just that being my assumption about how war movies are going to go, that it's like going to be like, I think that movie's depiction of D-Day, right? That's in there.
Yes.
I have a very great grasp of what's in this movie. And just this sort of, and it's funny because I love horror movies, and I actually last night was watching Predator because I'm doing my homework before watching Prey, the Predator prequel, I guess. It was a very PR heavy sentence.
Prey the Predator prequel, yes.
Right.
That should have been the full title.
And I feel like Predator is like as close as I get to a war movie, where it's like these people are, they're doing special ops. There's like a military element to it, but essentially it's like a finite number of people at a remote location dealing with a scary thing. Like that's what I love to see. Half of the movies I watch boil down to that in some capacity. And war movies, I feel like I don't consciously seek them out. I think war itself is like feels so complicated to think about, and just the sort of, what we've been touching on in this whole conversation of like that in America we have a culture of like extreme reverence for people who are veterans of combat, but also this like sense of like, obviously it's very like we revere you because we would never dream of asking you to stop doing that, and that's what you get in exchange. And like that's a lot of, so it's a complicated ethical situation to think through in entertainment, I guess, and it's just less complicated if it's like Arnold versus a guy who's like clearly a dick even for his planet. That's what I want to see.
But that's the thing, like Predator I think of as more of a combat movie than a war movie, and like Commando is the same. And it's the reason why the two Top Gun movies are so wildly successful, because they sort of abstract the war so much that you're like, this is combat.
Right. Or they're like peacetime play acting movies or something.
Right. This is just about fighting. You don't have to think about the larger structures at play. You don't have to think about what the greater goals are. It's about like how many.
It's about skirmishes.
It's like playing Asteroid. It's like how many things do I have to shoot down or whatever. And I do feel like, I mean, the fact that you bring up to horror movies, but like as a child, even probably into my teen years, when I would go see a horror movie, it would feel to me like those moments before going on a roller coaster, where it's like, I'm miserable right now. I'm shitting my pants. I hate this. I don't want to do it. And then when you're on it, it's simultaneously punishing and thrilling. And then I feel good when it's done, right? And then now I think I enjoy horror movies pretty thoroughly without that tension, without that fear, the anticipatory dread. But I do feel that way watching war movies where I'm like, God, I don't want to fucking watch this. Even if I know this is good, I don't want to fucking watch this. And the whole time I'm watching it, it's driving me insane. And then when it's done, I'm like, I'm very glad I watched that, which is like how I feel about this. Saving Private Ryan, which is a movie I had avoided my entire life until we had to cover it for the podcast. It took me 6 hours to finish watching it. And then I was like, well, I love this movie. This movie's a masterpiece. I'll buy it on fucking Steelbook. I will never watch it again. Because I was like, oh, it's great film. I want to study this. I want to watch this again sometime. And it's like, I fucking can't. I can't. Not just the immediacy of the combat, because, it's a great steal. It's a great fucking steal. I'm happy to have it on the shelf. But
I remember I put that movie on and Forky was like, this is so sad. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I've seen it 50 times.
Yeah.
It is sad. Very sad. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I spiral out on those things. And I feel like this is a movie that is kind of explicitly about that, which is perhaps why I was going to say enjoy it more, but enjoy it isn't the word. I do think this is a great movie, but I am just clenching the armrest the entire time, equally in the battlefield sequences and in the fucking conversation dialogue scenes.
I guess I just love, there's like a certain gratification to seeing a movie that's like, yeah, death is horrible, right? And like dying in combat is also really bad, and being executed by your own side for basically no reason is even worse. And we're not going to console you with anything. That's just it. Like, I've also been on a Rennie Harlan kick, and I've been noticing how there's at least 2 of his movies, Deep Blue Sea and Cliffhanger, where someone who's about to die horribly says, I don't want to die. I assume so the audience doesn't think like, well, maybe they were cool with that happening. And just like,
maybe they're kind of like, yeah, I gotta go sometime.
Also,
right?
Tragic
and might
irony.
As well be the super shark.
My greatest dream in life is to not die. I hope it never happens.
The guy just died.
Right? It's like fucking Scully and McBain talking about wanting to retire to his boat. My dream, to keep living.
I want to say a couple of things. One thing I love about Predator, though, it is somewhat of a satire, like so many post-Vietnam movies, right? Where it's like these guys are like, well, we could deal with this problem. We have such big guns. Like, surely all of our big guns will kill the Predator. And then obviously, like, they don't know how to handle someone who actually knows how to use the environment against them. And then they eventually figure it out. But, you know, like
until they do a lot of bushcraft. Arnold got the merit badge for that.
Exactly. Eventually, you know, they get their noggins in gear. Saving Private Ryan, I think, is an incredible parallel to Paths of Glory, because it's also about a very absurd mission in that it's like, hey, guys, you got to go get this one guy in World War II because his brothers died. And everyone in the movie is like, well, we're all struggling here. You know, like this, like, it's not like this doesn't suck for me. What, this guy's brothers did? So like, I have to, and they're like, I don't know, man. We're drawing a line somewhere and you're going to go get this guy.
We can't go back to his mom's front porch a 4th time and give her bad news again.
Yeah, it's too fucked up. And in Saving Private Ryan, of course, there is like this, because it's a Spielberg movie partly, but also because it's a World War II movie, there's this sort of like stirring good to it, even though it is a movie about the absolute absurdity of like, how do we define heroism in these circumstances? And then Paths of Glory is World War I. So it's like, yeah, we did that for no good reason. We accomplished nothing. And one of you has to, 3 of you have to die because we're embarrassed about it, I guess. Like, because in retrospect, it was even stupider.
Well, they're in an interesting way, they're kind of inverse movies, because Saving Private Ryan is like, we need to follow through on this mission, A, because it's a symbolic victory, and B, because the absurd awfulness of this thing has gotten so macro that at least there's kind of a micro, we can apply a micro empathy to one person who is outside of this thing and go, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to give her bad news again? Whereas this movie is just like, how am I supposed to fucking explain this to my boss? Someone has to fucking take the fall for this.
And then, of course, like, the brilliance of having, it's like, okay, well, 3 of you have got to get put on trial. And so it's like, well, let's pick this one guy who is no good. He's played by Timothy Carey, and it's like
The most
look,
extreme man who's ever existed.
Right. This guy's just obviously no good. We'll pick this guy. Then let's pick this second guy who kind of knows that about the fuck up with this scouting mission. We'll try and get him off the board. Two birds, one stone.
Fuck up. He shot his fellow soldier. I would label it
Yes,
a little
it's not
bit
good.
stronger than a fuck up.
Okay, it was a snafu.
Okay, you're right.
Right. It was a snafu. It was very
Perhaps
it was
a
very
rhubarb.
bad. And then they're like, third guy, and they're like, oh, I don't know, pick the third guy randomly. And they're like, okay, we picked it looks like he's a war hero who's been decorated a bunch. And they're like, okay, fine. Put him on trial too. And so then there's that moment where Kirk Douglas is like, hey, can I point out that this guy is an absolutely decorated hero? And they're like, shut up, sit down. We're trying to get through this. We got lunch to get to. Don't, come on. Don't even bring that up.
That felt like the most legally accurate moment in any movie. Just can I say something highly relevant and exculpatory? And they're like, no.
no, thank you. We don't want to hear it. Yes.
Move it along.
We should also mention that this is Kubrick and Tim Carey's second movie together, and very much their last.
Fully their last. Yes.
Kubrick fired.
This is where Kubrick is fully sick of him after this one.
He fired Tim
Despite
Carey.
his incredible face.
An incredible performance. I think he's amazing in this.
He's really good.
Yeah.
He's really
So
good.
fucking captivating. But they essentially fired him the moment his final close-up was done. And they were like, everything else we can get done with a double. Let's just prioritize the things that are on his face, and then we'll turn some guy, we'll get a fucking dentist with a cape to Bela Lugosi him. But one of the things, Tim Carey, just every take wanted to do something different, so continuity was a fucking nightmare. And I think he was so sort of primal and behavioral in how he worked that he drove all the other actors up the wall. But during the making of this film, he fakes his own kidnapping.
He did. And look, Griff, you don't like to, he's trying to get some publicity going. What's wrong with that?
It's the easiest way to juice up your IMDb star meter numbers. We all know this. And it works out great for everyone who's done it.
He got himself tied up and gagged and put on the road in Munich, and the cops found him and were like, what's up with you? And he was like, I was kidnapped. And they were like, okay. And it became a news story. And he just fucking made it up.
Right. New York Times front page story.
Yeah.
Can you just imagine how fucking angry Kubrick was? Where it's just first of all, I can't get this guy to do what I want. And now also, he's fucking kidnapping himself.
He's making his own side movies.
I'm equally stressed out when he is on and off set.
So yes, as you said, they fired him when the last scene that his face would be in was filmed. They fired him the next day. Also, the guy who played the priest, Emil Mayer, really hated Timothy Carey because in the death scene, which is so powerful, where he's saying, I don't want to die, and he's being dragged, Timothy Carey would do things like bite his arm and wrestle around and harass him essentially. And the guy playing the priest really hated it. But I guess Timothy Carey was like, hey, it's acting. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of can't argue with the results as much as I am kind of happy I never had to hang with this guy.
He's got a great face. So the other guys are a little more anonymous, right? I don't know. Joe Turkel, who people
then
would know from many Kubrick movies.
Becomes the bartender in The Shining, but also he's Tyrell in Blade Runner. Yeah, there's an interesting cross-section of him finding some new company players in this film and him disposing of some old ones.
Yeah, right. Who plays the other guy? Because Turkel plays Arnaud, the war hero, the guy who's so beaten up at the end that he basically just gets tied to the post to be shot, right? Because he can't stand up, which is a horrible.
It's incredibly brutal. Yeah.
I wrote a quote down. If he's still alive in the morning, pinch his cheeks a couple of times. The general wants him to be conscious.
This shit sucks. Why the fuck does anyone do this? I'm not saying why do they enlist. I'm saying why does anyone do I don't know. I'm a child.
Why? We're living like that. It's nice too that this movie is about the absurdity of execution, right? They give you a nice meal before they kill you. If you fracture your skull, they're like, don't let him die. We got to kill him. This is all still basically happening. Except for the duck. I don't think you're going to get duck out of an American prison.
The duck looks good. Timothy Carey, of course, ate that duck. I want to find the exact number because Kubrick did so many takes, of course. He ate that. It's pretty much a whole duck, right? 86 times.
That's the thing. The way he's eating it, they have to reset with a clean duck every time. It's not like he's just pulling a drumstick off and they can cheat it to camera.
He would eat it different every time somehow, in that miraculous Timothy Carey way.
Duck is gamey. Like I couldn't eat 2 helpings.
It's very rich.
Yeah.
Very rich. Really, yeah. That'll really put you to sleep at a certain point. It's Ralph Meeker is the other guy, right? And he's from Kiss Me Deadly, and he's in the Dirty Dozen later, and so he's a guy. He's got a real sort of nice clean face, nice square jawed guy. But I feel like we've talked about pretty much everyone in this movie now. Yes, yeah, I don't think we've really missed anyone here. The execution is very, very powerful and horrible. And then I really do find the next 2 scenes just as incredible. The scene where Dax has the showdown with Brouillard, right? Where he's like, I wasn't doing this for like politics. Like I genuinely thought this was like a miscarriage of justice. And Brouillard is like, ew, like what? I thought I understood you.
Gross.
You're right. Horrible. Get out of my sight. And then the scene at the inn with Kubrick's future wife singing this folk song, like is the best ending. Like, and apparently Kubrick was really embarrassed about it because he was like, I know I have a crush on this girl. I'm not putting her at the end just because I like her. I promise you guys. And I would have been like, yes, Stan, no, I know. It's a good ending.
Yeah, it's a really good ending. Yeah. I mean, there's also just that thing with war movies where you're like watching this, she shows up and you realize, oh, I haven't seen a woman in 80 minutes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
This is like a weird stance of mine I come back to a lot, is that like I love it when movies like don't pretend to be interested in women when they clearly aren't. And so movies like, this,
Master and
The
Commander.
Thing, Stand By Me, where it's just like we're living in a world of men, and it's like, great, thank you.
Lawrence of
I'm
Arabia.
happy that you're admitting that's what you're interested in. Yeah, because then when they're like, it's a world of men, but also there's 3 women and they're horribly written and they're always like whipping their hair out of ponytails.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like if somebody's going to film something in Portland, Oregon, my hometown, and like get the geography all wrong and get it just like, it's like, just admit that you're filming it in Georgia, which is where I, Tanya was filmed because of tax incentives or something. It's like, just be like, we're filming it in Georgia. It's set in Georgia. We're not saying this is the Pacific Northwest. We're not claiming to know anything about women. It's like, thank you. Good. Go know things about men.
You rather people are sincere in their shortcomings or their lack of interest rather than the sort of the token. Well, look.
Yeah.
Well, come on. What if Guinevere was a Celtic warrior?
There's this thing, like, I mean, I keep on coming back to it because it's just the most fascinating cultural object of the year 2022, year of our Lord. But in The Offer, of course, I've been fully offer-pilled.
Jesus Christ.
Every episode ends with like the people who made the offer talking about how great the episode you just watched was. And
sure, I do love that. I love the
it.
Propaganda show. Yeah, the clip show that airs afterward.
It's maybe better than The Offer. Is that the sort of mini-sodes I get at the end of each episode of The Offer? But the co-showrunner, I forget her name. She was also the showrunner on the Al Pacino Nazi Hunter show.
Sure, Hunters.
Yes.
Oh yeah. The show whose promo engines made me think, oh, Fisher Stevens is looking more and more without like Al Pacino.
Yes.
No, that's just Al Pacino.
But there's one of those things where she said, like, when I came onto this project, it was really important to me that the female characters weren't just accessories to the men and that they actually had their own victories. And then you're like, but they didn't. That's not accurate.
Right. You failed.
Right.
Right. I'm sure that was
off.
important.
She's like, it was important to me that we do that, and then we were unsuccessful.
Well, they're
right. Yeah. Then she's like, she's taking in breath to say the rest of the sentence, and then we cut away. What female characters are even in The Offer, Griffin?
Well, there's like Juno Temple is Al Ruddy's assistant. There's a character who's like the head of casting for Paramount There's Al Ruddy's ex-wife, who was the woman who owned the Chateau Marmont, later joined the Wild Wild Country cult. Like, there are a couple primary female characters like that, and they want to really build up, like, what they accomplished in this time. But she's stuck fighting against the reality of, like, it was Hollywood in the 70s. Like, they made
The Godfather.
Right.
Right.
And, like, meanwhile, the show is, like, completely uninterested in, like, Talia Shire or Diane Keaton or the people whose, like, work on The Godfather was, like, tangible, right? And I think maybe those two characters have 3 lines of dialogue between them. And, like, Talia Shire exists just to kind of be, like, a victim who's embarrassed on set. Yes, it is that thing, though. It's, like, if you're dealing with the actual historical reality of this thing, but also the world that this thing existed in, and especially when the project is so much about, like, I don't know, the ills of masculinity and whatever, to put a woman in there being like, I just want everyone to know
that I am making 67 cents for every dollar that James Caan is making. And it's like, yeah, right. And then if there aren't meaningful roles to give people, then it just feels like it's like you're being asked, it's like you're getting an artificial sweetener. You're like, I know that this tastes like something, but I'm not getting any energy from it.
Right.
Michael Gandolfini's in the offer. I'm seeing a lot of names here. Danny Nucci. Haven't heard about him in a while.
Everyone's in
Danny
the offer.
Nucci.
Paul McCrane's in the offer.
The star of Titanic. Paul McCrane. The only gay person at Performing Arts High in fame.
You gotta take the pill. You gotta accept the offer.
The iceberg is on the show.
Yeah, the iceberg's on the show.
Accept the offer.
You must accept.
I will, however, never forget describing to my brother having just seen Titanic when I was 11 years old, and he was like, "What happens?" And I was like, "Well, at one point, the smokestack falls on this Italian guy, and he goes, 'Mamma mia!' before it kills him." And then I rewatched the movie, and I was like, "Oh, he doesn't say 'Mamma mia.'" But I just, as an 11-year-old, I just imagined that he did.
In your mind, he was spinning a pizza on one finger,
right?
Curling his mustache on the other.
Yeah. He's like, "It's a me, Fabrizio. I'm looking for Fabrizio."
I mean, the film's portrayal of the Irish American community is pretty much that nuance. So I guess that's what I was going for. But Danny Nucci, what a name! Here he is.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I'm happy for him too.
David, Bombas' mission is simple. Make the most comfortable clothes ever. Match every item sold with an equal item donated. So when you buy Bombas, you're also giving to someone in need.
I love Bombas.
It's that simple. That's all we had to say. We just had to read that verbatim.
Look, there's a pair of Bombas socks for everything you do.
Yep.
Comfy performance styles made with sweat-wicking yarns.
Mm-hmm.
Your feet are going to stay cool while the rest of you works up a sweat.
I'm having an awful day.
I'm sorry.
You know why?
Why?
Not wearing Bombas.
Ugh, disgusting.
I grabbed some cheap socks out of the drawer, and it threw my whole day off. What were you going to say, Ben?
This producer, Ben, I have a personal experience with Bombas. I got some no-show socks, and they've been working great, and they don't slide down like other no-show socks, where it's like you're out and about walking around, and eventually it just comes down, and it's like on under your heel at this point now. You're getting a blister. Not with Bombas.
Interesting that the peeper doesn't like people peeping his socks. He wants them to be hidden.
Sometimes you just want to have a clean look.
Fair enough. Look, Bombas doesn't just make socks. They make t-shirts, and those t-shirts are made with thoughtful design features like invisible seams, soft fabrics, and the perfect weight so they can hang just right.
Bombas underwear.
Well, hey now.
Which I've really pretty much switched to. Kind of just my brand at this point. Love
Pretty
it.
breathable, huh?
Breathable, fits well, feels like you're not wearing much at all. And, of course,
yes,
socks, underwear, t-shirts, the 3 most requested clothing items at homeless shelters.
Boom, boom,
That's why Bombas donates 1 for every item you buy. Griffin always likes to say they're good at Shark Tank or something.
No, they're the most successful product in the history of Shark Tank. They're not just good at Shark Tank or something.
They've donated over 50 million items of essential clothing. Now listen, if you go to bombas.com/check, you'll get 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/check for 20% off. Bombas.com/check.
David, could you put your pants back on?
No. Paths of Glory. I don't know. It's a blessedly short movie, Griff. We were saying this.
Yes.
Because, the works of Stanley Kubrick is a lot of long ones.
Mm-hmm.
You got Spartacus and Lolita coming up after this, which are both over 2.5 hours long.
But also, I mean, this is in many ways a punishing movie It is
It
able
is.
to
It is.
thoroughly explore its subjects and its themes and really place you in this world, but get you out within 88 minutes, which is kind of blissful. You like appreciate that it didn't torture you for the sake of it, you know?
This goes to my very strong belief that like for a horror movie to be like over 90 minutes and like really 80 minutes, I think is typically the ideal length. But like I'll give you up to 9 on top of that. And then if you're like 90 minutes long or longer, it's like, okay, you've got to be really high concept for this to be worthwhile. Cause I do think that this, like, in terms of the emotions it creates for me, it's to some extent a horror movie because it's like you sit down, you know that things are not going to go well unless you've like only seen the poster, in which case maybe you think they'll go great for everybody. And you're just like you're like, okay, I'm just watching everybody be ground down by this relentless, unstoppable wheel, and that's what I'm in for. And like if you're watching a movie where like there's the idea at any point that there's real hope for people, I think you can endure that for longer. But this is like it is. I was curious also. I wonder if there's like behind the scenes information that you guys have about like was it just what well, I guess they had a pretty good budget, so it's not like they were forced to make something short. It's interesting to me that Kubrick made a short movie. That's interesting.
It is interesting that this movie is short, although as Griffin says, it gets it all done and it's quite punishing to watch. Like, a 2.5 hour version of this movie might be unwatchably brutal.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it would become numbing.
Yeah. But maybe it is a budget thing in terms of like we have a moderate budget and we have the scale. We can do the scale of the big battle.
Right.
But that's it. Like there's not going to be like multiple, gigantic. It's going to be one big battle and then a lot of chatting and prison stuff. And yeah, right.
That's the thing. Like knowing the budget of this movie relative to the budget he gets on the following films, I was surprised by how big the battlefield sequence felt. How wide it is, how many people there are, how many explosions there are, how extended it is. It goes on for a long time. And the answer is like that is the money sequence. And then the rest of the movie takes place in ditches and offices.
Yeah, I do think it's a great film. That's really my take.
I did too.
On Paths of Glory. Yeah, I really have not anything bad to say about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of his best films, and I think it is unusual that it's, I think even people who love The Killing, the sort of Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing run feels like, well, that's the developmental, that's him figuring out his stuff, right? The Killing is when he finally has sort of like a real grasp on the language. And then this somehow gets stuck in this zone where it's not thought of as one of the important ones, I think. Because from this movie on, it's like, well, everything he does is huge and iconic and historic to some degree, And I feel like this sort of sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, but I think it's one of his best films. I think Ebert even argued it was perhaps his best film.
I'm not a Kubrick completist, so I can't say because I need to see, you have to see everything before you can pronounce. But I mean, to me, it feels the most complete and coherent and like this sort of like perfectly crafted box, where you're like a puzzle box. Everything fits together. Everything's tight. Everything works. And then I feel like once you've made that, you might be kind of bored by the idea of doing that again because you've already done it. And then you would be like, okay, like what happens if we get baggy? What happens if we really like play with boredom?
Yes.
The film came out in 57, Christmas 57. Although we're going to do the box office game from like early 58 when it went wide.
Zero Oscar nominations, but it gets BAFTA for Best Film nomination. He gets a Writers Guild nomination, Kubrick for the script.
Yeah, so it was a well-received film that probably broke even-ish, it like did okay. Its big problem, of course, was it was not really released in Europe. It was apparently not even shown to the French censorship board.
Wow.
Because they knew there was no chance that France would allow it. It was shown in Berlin, but there was so much protest that it was removed from the slate of the Berlin Film Festival.
What were people protesting?
That it didn't make them look like cool badasses. I don't know. I guess it's basically just like, this is too touchy for us. Even now, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, I do appreciate it as a war movie where like everybody comes out looking terrible. You don't get a ton of those.
No.
That's the thing about the idea of like Kirk Douglas saying like, oh, he wrote this happy ending script. I'm like, supposedly the general comes in and is like, forget about it. But like, there's no character here to turn to.
Yeah.
Like, there's no one in this movie where you're like, well, if Kirk Douglas could just talk to this guy who clearly has some moral backbone, then maybe. It's like, no, the guy doesn't exist. Like, it's just, there's no one around.
You haven't set up a Lil Rel who can show up at the end in the cop car and save you.
Yeah, we need to do the National Lampoon Christmas Vacation ending where Brian Doyle Murray shows up and is like, okay, you guys, I've sorted it out. It's going to be fine.
It would be great if it was literally Brian Doyle Murray showing him.
He might have been alive.
Yeah.
It is like, you know what I am going to say? I think it's the best movie ever made about the American legal system, and it's a war movie set in France. So
I mean,
that says a lot.
And that's a good argument for everyone doing an American accent, not attempting to play like it might have been semi-intentional.
It's they're just doing a Ratatouille. It's just like, why is Brian Dennehy in France? Who cares? Right. It's fine.
Forget it. Yeah, Kubrick, of course. Also, the other thing is he makes no money on this movie.
Yes,
which is one reason he's going to Spartacus, because he really needs to make some money.
Daddy's got to get paid
because he deferred his salary based, hoping it would gross some money, and it doesn't gross enough to pay him. Should we play the box office game, Griffin?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, so Sarah, this is the segment where I try to guess the box office of the weekend the movie came out, which is based on the fact that my father and I would read the box office together every Monday as like the equivalent of him doing that with the sports scores with my brother.
That's lovely.
I will say it gets exponentially harder when the box office weekends are from 50 years before I was born.
Before you were born. Sure.
I'm doing the math wrong.
It's not the best. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
You're very well spoken for a 14-year-old, I must say.
I don't know how old I am or what year I was born or when this movie came out. The only math I understand is at the box office. Yeah.
Well, Griffin, number one at the box office the week that Paths of Glory goes wide is the Best Picture winner of 1957, which is still just dominating in theaters.
The winner of
it's
1957.
Also a war movie.
It's a war movie.
It's also a war movie, and it's about the futility of war, but it is an epic war movie in beautiful Technicolor with all kinds of great performances. It's a really good movie. It's from a
Technicolor from a major. Oh, is it Bridge on the River Kwai?
It is The Bridge on the River Kwai. Yes, by David Lean. It's with Alec Guinness and William Holden. Have you guys seen Kwai? You guys gone to the bridge?
I have not crossed the bridge.
I saw like the first 20 minutes with my dad once, because like he was a Technicolor war movie guy. But we would often watch the first 20 minutes and then become bored.
It's very much a movie I have been waiting to catch a rep screening of. That I'm just like, I should see that in a theater.
Yeah.
And I've never had the right opportunity.
Incredible Alec Guinness performance. Obviously, he wins the Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
Number two at the box office is a literary adaptation of a Russian masterpiece.
Okay.
And I feel like one reason that this movie is getting made is that the star is a Russian. There is a Russian actor who is a major star at the time.
Yul Brynner
himself. So I guess they were kind of like, okay, I don't know, is there some Russian stuff we could put you in, right? Like, because I did not know about this movie. I've actually was unaware of this one. But it's a Yul Brynner picture based on a great novel, great Russian novel. It's directed by Richard Brooks. Griff, who made, In Cold Blood and Elmer Gantry and
what genre is it?
I don't know. It's sort of like an epic family drama. It's about a family. All right, I'm just gonna tell you.
Yeah, what is this?
It's the Brothers Karamazov.
There's a Yul Brynner Brothers Karamazov movie?
Yes, starring Yul Brynner and Lee J. Cobb, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, no idea this movie existed.
Nah, yeah,
When
I had no
think of
idea.
Russia, I think of Lee K. Cobb.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, right. Listen here, Dimitri.
And William Shatner. Shatner's in this.
Yes, a young William Shatner. You've also got Maria Schell, who I feel like people might know, Austrian actress from
Wow.
some classics. Yeah. So that's number 2. Number 3 is a great courtroom drama from a great director. One of his sort of straightforward noir-y dramas.
It's not Judgment at Nuremberg.
Nope. No, it's not. The director made a lot of comedies. That's why I sort of say it's like one of his dramas.
Is it a Wilder?
But this was like, yeah, it's a Billy Wilder film.
It's a Billy Wilder courtroom movie.
Nominated for Best Picture. It's got a really good performance. This will probably give it away. By Charles Lawton, as the prosecutor.
Oh,
Or maybe he's the lawyer.
Fuck. What's it called?
It's got one of those legal sounding titles.
Yes.
It's called Witness
It's for the prosecution. I knew it was something for the prosecution. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Tyrone Power, Marlene Dietrich, and Charles Lawton swinging in as the big lawyer guy. And Elsa Lanchester, your favorite.
The bride
of Frankenstein herself.
Yep.
Good movie if no one's ever seen it.
Well, the bride of Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was actually the name of the scientist who made the monster.
Right. Thank you. Number 4 at the box office is a Best Picture winner from 1956 that's been re-released.
Whoa.
And it's just making more money. One of the worst films to ever win Best Picture, supposedly. I've actually never seen it.
A Greatest Show on Earth?
Nope, but right vibe. 3-hour epic comedy.
Around the World in 80
with
Days?
A bunch of stars. Yes, Around the World in 80 Days. Never seen it.
Me neither.
Anyone seen Around the World in 80 Days?
I watched the opening sequence once. It was like 5 minutes long. It's like an early Saul Bass sequence. That's all I got.
I saw the Jackie Chan version. A lot shorter.
Sure. Coogan's in that one, right?
Yeah. Frank Karachi picture. That's got a weird ass cast. It's Schwarzenegger's last movie before he becomes governor.
Yes. I remember that.
What a life.
Number 5, Griffin, you will never have heard of. It is a documentary film shot in Cinerama, which is the Cinerama.
Yes.
3-screen curved. No, just for our listeners, curved thing. And it's about the search for it's called Search for Paradise, and that's what it's about like looking for Shangri-La.
Is it an ad for the city of Trenton?
Of course. It's about Trenton, New Jersey. Griff, it's about like some Air Force guy who retires and goes looking for, paradise in his fighter jet, I guess. And so it's a lot of like aerial photography and stuff. I don't know. It sounds boring as fuck, but it was enough of a hit to chart. The other movies in the top 10, you've got Rain Tree Country.
Okay.
Which is like a Monty Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, like Southern romance, big Civil War, sort of Gone with the Wind kind of thing. I've never seen it. You've got A Farewell to Arms, the movie adaptation of the Ernest Hemingway classic. One of the many adaptations, I guess. And you've got Cowboy, a Delmer Daves movie.
I've never seen that.
With Glenn Ford, which I've seen. I think I have the Criterion of it. Isn't there a Criterion of it?
Oh boy.
With Glenn Ford and Jack Lemmon, which is a blast, and was famously written in a bathtub.
Oh boy, Splish Splash.
It was written by Dalton Trumbo.
It was Trumboed.
And God Created Woman, which is that Roger Vadim movie with Brigitte Bardot. That like I remember watching when I was a teenager, like a little teenage cineast being like, all right, this thing's gonna be really raunchy. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, I see, it's raunchy by 1950 standards. It's
this movie has
not that raunchy.
Full on neck.
Right. This movie's got so much hair over boobs.
Yeah.
You're gonna go
That's
crazy.
Why it's called necking. The neck is the sexiest part.
It was rated X for 2 shoulders.
Right.
There's something so weird about this period where color has existed comfortably for a while, but there is still a lot of black and white coexisting. Like you have like technology like Cinerama, you have black and white as an artistic choice, even if it's becoming less commercial. You have huge sort of modern epics and smaller, more intimate things where like that grouping of movies you just listed off don't feel like they exist at the same time for me.
It's true. They feel like 20 years on a spectrum of like 20 years. It is crazy.
Somehow some of those movies feel like late 40s movies and some of them feel like early 60s movies, and all of them are in the mid to late 50s.
It reminds me of when in the Hudsucker Proxy, I think they mention at some point, they're like, yeah, it's like 1958 or something. And you're like, oh my God, you're like very close to all of this being completely different.
That is the best movie. We love Hudsucker.
Movie.
If we ever do the Coens, it's mostly for like the Hudsucker and Hail Caesar episodes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like Hudsucker's the episode I want to do more than anything, and Hail Caesar's the one that you want to do more than anything. And we like all of their movies, but those are the fucking two that we're like jonesing to talk about.
Right. The movies that when they came out, the critics were like, this is very accomplished, but why did you do this and for who? And the answer was for all of us who found it over the years.
Right. This is a smaller effort from the Coens.
Love to call things a minor effort. It is the best thing that critics do, and I'm among them, where I'm like, minor effort. I'm like, you know what? What do I fucking know?
You don't fucking know. Sir, I've been listening to episodes of You're a Good and really enjoying it. And as I said, we have so many guests. If you are a listener, Blank Check, who have been on this show, have been on your show. Julie Klausner, recent guest. Gether, as I mentioned, Dana Schwartz, Josh Gondelman.
We haven't had Julia. Oh, no, we did have Julia on. Oh, my God. We have to have her on again. That's right. She talked about Pretty in Pink. I'm like, have her in my like to get back on category.
Yes.
You should make the show. You know more about it than I do.
Hey now. But also so many great movies and actually like auteur-driven movies that we have not gotten to cover yet. It was really fun listening to like the Groundhog Day episode with Gondelman is great. That's a movie that's very ripe for exploring through the prism of human emotions. But I highly recommend it, and I feel like we don't need to recommend You're Wrong About, because it's a humongous show that everyone loves. That's one of the commonly accepted higher art podcasts in the world.
Naturally. Yeah, I mean, I feel like You Are Good is like my like second child who like people, it's like my Gordy and Stand By Me. I'm like, my older child is a big ball player, but you know, my younger child writes stories and I'm very proud of them. This is if Gordy had supportive parents.
Right.
But thank you so much. That means a lot to me because this is a wonderful show and I feel like it's true. And I feel like it's like, I'm curious what you all think about this. I feel like when I introduce my show, I'm like, I would never call it a movie criticism show because I feel like the term criticism, at least on the internet, has come to mean like nitpicking something to the point where you're like daring anyone to admit that they're capable of enjoying it, regardless of what it is. And I feel like movies are something where like, if you're entering the conversation without checking your own baggage and being like, I am admitting like these are the things that I love and irrationally just like want to experience, and we're not going to have an entirely rational, critical conversation because like to be willing to talk about a movie for an hour is like either you hate it so much that you have a ton to say about it or you're a fan. And there's I feel like some amount of love has to go into a conversation about movies. And I appreciate you making space for that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's very nice of you to say. And I don't want to speak for David, who is a professional film critic, but I feel like we always just try to remind ourselves that, like, oh, right, the function of this show is the two of us specifically as people, and whoever the guest is, talking about their relationship to that movie rather than trying to offer the definitive history or complete analysis or any of that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Also, we just like talking about movies. We don't.
I like talking about movies, and I agree. Like, you know, I don't know.
And sometimes there's bits too.
Sometimes we no, we don't.
Yeah,
Ben, it's
but we don't.
No.
You're right.
It's a no bits podcast. It's very serious. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. And I thank you to Heidi Vanderlee for helping organize this, along with all the other people I've mentioned who recommended that you be on the show over the years. And thank you all, you listeners out there, for supporting the show. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media and helping produce the show in countless other ways. Thank you to Joe Bowen and Pat Reynolds for our artwork, AJ McKeon and Alex Barron for our editing, Lane Montgomery and The Great American Novel for our theme song, JJ Birch for our research. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to all sorts of nerdy shit, including our Patreon Blank Check special features, where we do franchise commentaries and other sorts of bonus things. We're doing the Roger Moore Bond movies right now, and some fun little Kubrick bonuses as well coming down the pike. Tune in next week for Spartacus with Richard Lawson. Although a lot of other people stood up and announced that they were the guest on that episode. Like Richard did say, I'll guest on Spartacus, and then other people went, I'll guest on Spartacus, I'll guest on Spartacus. But I do think Richard Lawson was the guest on that episode.
I think so. We're still unpacking it.
If memory can be trusted. Yeah. And as always, war is fucking stupid.